Welcome to Jobbed Out, the wrestling editorial that reminds you that the phrase, "I can't be in two places at once," does not apply to pro wrestling. Rick Rude is an absolute legend. The WWE Hall of Famer was one of the greatest despicable heels in the 1980s before revitalizing his career in WCW in the 90s. After having to retire early due to back issues, he would become a founding member of D-Generation X. Yes, really. And one of his most unique achievements happened during the Monday Night Wars. On November 11, 1997, 2 days after the Montreal Screwjob, the WWE would tape an upcoming episode of Raw to air on the 17th. In it, a bearded Rick Rude would very simply introduce the rest of DX and stand alongside the group. What the WWF didn't know at the time was that Rude took the Screwjob personally. What fans didn't know at the time was that the Ravishing One's WWF contract had actually lapsed, and he had already come to an agreement to join WCW.
Sunday night, who's calling me? I didn't recognize the number. Picked up the phone. It was Rick Rude. And Rick proceeded to tell me what he just saw. And he just flat out asked me, "You got any room?" I said, "Sure."
So on November 17th, 1997, on the same night a taped episode of Raw would air, a mustache-sporting Rick Rude would march down the Monday Nitro ramp and cut a scathing promo against the WWF.
What's right is for Bret Hart to abandon the Titanic.
This moment, a performer appearing on two rival companies' shows on the same day became known as pulling a Rick Rude, and for nearly 2 decades it hadn't been done again. How could it? For much of the 2000s and 2010s, there was no major competition, let alone competition running on the same night. But now that sports entertainment is in a boom again and that there's loads of wrestling to watch every night of the week, we can now look at not just a couple, but a whole handful of other wrestlers who appeared on 2 wrestling shows on the same day. So let's get to it. This is Freaks 5 Wrestlers Who Pulled a Rick Rude. Number 5. AJ Francis, TNA and Major League Wrestling. Top Dollar has a love-hate relationship with the internet wrestling community, especially Twitter. A former member of Hit Row, he was fired by the WWE a month after his main roster debut for telling management they were wrong to fire his friend B-Fab.
But if you get rid of B-Fab, we're just hip-hop New Day. I went to Laurinaitis and Vince and was like, yo, I feel like you shouldn't have did that.
He would soon be rehired, have one of the most unfortunate botches in wrestling history,
Top Dollar, more like Flop Dollar, yeah!
And then get fired again. Since leaving the WWE though, he's done alright for himself, forming First Class in TNA with Rich Swann and feuding with Joe Hendry. On February 29th, 2024, Francis would pull a Rick Rude, losing a tag team match on a taped episode of Impact before calling out Alex Kane at MLW's Intimidation Games less than half an hour later. Number 4. Tommaso Ciampa, NXT and Impact Wrestling. Johnny Gargano and Tommaso Ciampa were considered NXT darlings in the mid-2010s. Team DIY had banger after banger against anybody they faced, and their split in 2017 was devastating to viewers. Don't worry, they're good now. But in the earlier days before the two took off, Tommaso Ciampa took every booking he could. So on September 30th, 2015, Ciampa would actually pull a Rick Rude by pure chance, appearing on NXT in a losing effort against Tyler Breeze, taped 3 weeks earlier, as well as showing up on Impact in a loss against the future Cameron Grimes, which was also taped, but back in July. WWE would soon sign Ciampa to prevent a repeat, and Regeneration X would soon be born. Oh, and there was a whole love affair thing with Goldie, but whatever. Number 3. Tasha Steelz, Impact Wrestling and the NWA. Tasha Steelz is a 2-time Impact Knockouts Tag Team Champion as part of Fire and Flava with Kiera Hogan. She also held their solo Knockouts World title in 2022, but it would be smack dab in the middle of the pandemic that Steelz would get her claim to fame. On May 12, 2020, Steelz pulled a Rick Rude, competing on NWA Power, winning a triple threat against Ashley Vox and Marty Bell, a match that was actually taped 4 months earlier, while also making her singles debut at TNA with Kylie Ray. Despite the loss, Tasha Tuesday would still be a legendary date for the Boricua Badass. Number 2. Sean Hernandez, TNA and Lucha Underground. Of all the wrestlers to pull a Rick Rude, Hernandez has got to be the most controversial. The Mexican Superman had size and a great look, but he never really elevated out of TNA's tag division into becoming their next big star. So Hernandez would leave and find himself as one of the big name acquisitions of Lucha Underground. On June 24th, 2015, Hernandez would make a live return to TNA to join the Beatdown Clan at the same time a taped episode of Lucha Underground was airing, where Hernandez would whip Drago like a government mule. Thing was, Hernandez had told TNA officials that he'd been given his release from Lucha Underground and was a free agent. He lied. Lawyers got involved, all footage that included Hernandez and the BDC taped for future episodes of Impact would be scrapped, and the Tex-Mex T-Rex would be fired by both companies. Incredibly though, both TNA and Lucha Underground would rehire him in 2018 anyway. Now before I get to number 1, I bet you've spotted a pattern here. Yes, every entry involves TNA in one form or another. There were no wrestlers pulling a Rick Rude for so long because after WCW went out of business, there were really no competitors for the WWE. At least nobody running on the same day. In the 2010s that changed as WWE would expand to more nights and more companies would successfully grow to a national level. There would be a few cases of indie wrestlers appearing on AEW Dark, for example, while also being a plant on live WWE programming. And as the industry continues to grow and thrive, we should see this feat become more and more common. With all that said though, who's my number 1 pro wrestler to pull a Rick Rude and show up on 2 different companies' shows on the same day? Number 1. Kenny Omega, Impact Wrestling and AAA. A mere mention of Kenny Omega's name is polarizing enough among wrestling fans. Some fans absolutely love his strong style ring work, while others despise the comedy stuff he did a decade ago. There's a whole third group that hasn't seen 1 minute of him wrestling but listen to podcasts that say he's the devil, or reject the wrestling journalists who actually praise his stuff. Whether you love him or hate him, Kenny Omega has had a big hand in the modern wrestling renaissance as a founding member of All Elite Wrestling. Already the AAA Mega Champion and recently crowned AEW World Champion, Omega had his sights set on one of the top prizes from AEW's new collab partner, Impact Wrestling. At Final Resolution in December 2020, Omega appeared alongside Don Callis to hype up Carl Anderson while pulling a Rick Rude and defending his Mega title against Laredo Kid at Triple Mania 28. Not only is Omega the first active world champion to pull a Rick Rude, but he's also the only one to do it in 2 different countries on the same day. And there you have it, 5 wrestlers who pulled a Rick Rude, appearing on the same date in 2 different wrestling promotions. A previously unheard of feat that now is more of a fun little footnote in wrestling history. Of course, nothing compares to the shock and magnitude of the original and the circumstances around it, but I do want to ask you, do you remember any of these moments I mentioned, and what ran through your mind at the time? Which Rick Ruding is your personal favorite, and can you think of other times that it's happened that I didn't list off? Let me know in the comments, and be sure to subscribe to the channel for more because I want you to be a part of these conversations too. For now though, I better get my shoulders off the mat, so I want to thank you for tuning in to Jobbed Out. I'll catch you next time.